What's going on, Godzirra Nation? This is ArghGodzirra, and with the AFL 2019 season upon us in just a couple of days, it is time for me to drop my AFL 2019 season predictions. You can get along with this as well by dropping your predictions in the comment section down below. We did this last year and we missed the mark by a country mile. Some of them we weren't even close to predicting correctly. But this time around, what we're going to do is we're going to work from the bottom of the ladder up to the top, in which I think each team will end up finishing by the end of the season, and then we will talk about who I think will win the Brownlow, win the Colemen, win the Rising Star Award, as well as selecting a player or two that I think will be selected for the All-Australian 2019 team as well. But let's kick things off with my ladder predictions, and I'm pretty sure it's unanimous around the board. Bottom of the ladder, inaugural wooden spooners, is going to be the Gold Coast Suns. They just lost way too much talent in the off-season to be able to do much this season at all. They drafted some really good kids, but it's going to take a lot of time for those guys to find their feet in the system and to develop their skill. So the Gold Coast for me, finishing on bottom of the ladder. In 17th position, I had them originally finishing a lot higher than this at the beginning of the year, but after seeing Sam Docherty struck down with injury again, 17th position, I'm putting Carlton. I can see them finishing higher than this, I honestly can, but for my personal prediction, this is where I'm placing them. Cripps looks fit and ready to go, do not get me wrong, but I just feel that they're lacking a little bit of depth in some places, and they might have a similar season to what we saw in 2018. 16th position, I'm putting the Fremantle Dockers. I really think the loss of Lachie Neale out of that midfield is going to leave a bit of a gaping hole. They're starting to restructure their lineup with Rory Lobb up forward, Jesse Hogan up forward, and we saw in the JLT, they're trying different things, trying to find a new game style, and it was not working for them. If anything, they were probably one of the most lackluster teams on the JLT couple of weekends, and I don't see them showing much improvement at all this season. Nat Fyfe is back and hopefully fighting fit. He seemingly had a bit of an issue on the off-season with an injury, but I still don't think even with him firing, they're going to really find their feet. It's going to take a while for things to mesh together over at Fremantle, and unfortunately, I think Ross Lyon's time could be called by the end of the season. You heard it here first, ladies and gentlemen. In 15th position, I'm putting St Kilda. They picked up Dan Hanbury, they picked up Dean Kent, but that really didn't bolster the team that they really should be starting to build. Dan Hanbury, don't get me wrong, adds depth, but he's at the back end of his career now. His prime's probably past him, in my personal opinion. And even though I think they could win more games than I'm predicting them to win, I think realistically finishing about this spot on the ladder is a realistic finish for the Saints. They could prove me wrong. They could end up, pushing for a top 8 spot. They could do the impossible. We've seen weirder things happen before. Some people are actually predicting St Kilda to finish in the top 8, but not me. Unfortunately, I've got St Kilda this season finishing in 15th position. And I think Alan Richardson might be the first coach to go before the end of the season. I reckon he'll get sacked midway through. You heard that here first too, ladies and gentlemen. In 14th position, and one of the big sliders for 2019, I've got Port Adelaide. I think the loss of both Chad Wingard, absolute star player, and arguably one of the best outside runners in the competition with Jared Polek, as well as obviously Jasper Pittard in defence. Just like I said with Fremantle suffering without Lachie Neale, they're going to suffer in Port Adelaide without those 3 players. I mean, they've brought in Rockcliffe, they've got Jack Watts, and that's all good and proper, but I think you can't replace some of the players that they've lost on the off-season. They're going to slide, especially with Paddy Ryder going down as well. We don't know how long he's out for. Scott Lycett's going to have to carry the team, and he's a good ruckman, don't get me wrong, but he's new to the club, and we don't know the dynamic that he's going to bring in as their number 1 ruckman. So I think Port Adelaide this year might be one of the biggest sliders for the season. In 13th position, I've got the Western Bulldogs, which is unfortunate because the year they won the premiership, it was a real heartfelt story. They've got a really good young list. I still reckon their midfield is probably one of the best in the competition when running at 100%. But I just don't see them piecing enough wins together this year to contest for another final spot. They could prove me wrong. These are one of the teams that actually could prove me wrong. But I just feel finishing hereabouts on the ladder is probably a realistic finish for the Bulldogs this year. Let's face it, they're bringing in young kids. They're getting games into their youngsters. They're not focusing on, big premiership wins at the moment. They're focusing on bringing in the youth, getting the next level of players, game time, and ready to go. And once the Bulldogs hit their stride with those youngsters, they will be one of the better teams in the competition, mark my words. In 12th spot, one of the big movers I've got, because I really think they can finish anywhere from 12th to maybe 8th spot. I've got the Brisbane Lions. They brought in Jarryd Lyons, probably one of the most underrated trades in the off-season. They've got Lachie Neale, who's already showing his prowess around the ground during the JLT. And they've got young Archie Smith in the ruck. He's been looking really good, being able to help out. And they've got players all around the ground. Harris Andrews is back and firing in the back line. Daniel Rich is looking good. They're looking the goods. Everyone would have thought that without Dane Beams, they might have actually struggled a little bit. But with him leaving, I dare say, they've actually gotten better. And as I just said, this could be the surprise team this year that pushes for a top 8 spot and shocks the AFL world. I've got them finishing in 12th. They could finish higher, and personally I do hope they actually do finish higher, but I'm being realistic with my picks here. Got Brisbane finishing in 12th spot. In 11th spot, another slider here, I've got Hawthorn. I feel the loss of Tom Mitchell is going to be way bigger than people are anticipating. He was the main ball getter for that club, getting the ball, feeding it to other players. You take him out of the mix, and you've got players that didn't really get their hands on the ball all that much last season, being the players having to get the ball, and we don't know how that's going to go down. We're going to have young Cousins thrown in the mix, Jaeger O'Meara. Who knows if Tom Scully's even going to be fit enough to get up this year. Hawthorn could finish in the top 8, and I really do hope they finish in the top 8, because I actually do love seeing Hawthorn play good football. But I just think the loss of Tom Mitchell, and even though you can't say the loss, you can't really say the loss of one man determines the team's output, but I really think with the level that Tom Mitchell played at last year, that is a huge gaping hole that oppositions are going to be able to take advantage of, and that's why I've got Hawthorn slipping down to 11th spot this year. In 10th position, I have Essendon. Now, everybody thinks Dylan Shiel is going to be the saviour that delivers them a premiership. And I think they're absolutely wrong. I don't know whether he was only going half-assed during the JLT, or whether there's something going on with a possible injury, but he looked very sluggish during the pre-season, struggled at times to get his hand to the ball. He is a very good player. He is an elite player, we know that. But he might be struggling to find his feet down in Essendon. I'm not 100% certain. I still think Essendon will be thereabouts, but just fall short of the mark. They do have, on paper, one of the better teams in the competition. Don't mince words there. I'm being serious. But I think this will be another year where we see them struggle just to take that extra step forward that they need to take to be a real contender. In 9th spot and missing finals this year, I have Geelong. Now bear with me. This holy trinity they keep on talking about. They brought in Dangerfield to help deliver a premiership. That hasn't happened. They brought Gary Ablett back home to deliver a premiership. That hasn't happened. If anything, they're too midfield centred at Geelong. Everybody that's been coming and going is midfield centred. They've pretty much got a one-man forward line in the way of the Tomahawk. You take the Tomahawk out of the mix and they'll struggle up forward. I mean, they brought Dalhouse in on the off-season. Good little pressure forward there, but we don't know how he's going to fit the Geelong dynamic all that much. I just feel Geelong will pretty much be thereabouts from 9th to 7th. But I think it was enough to see last year that if it wasn't for the fact that they finished against the Gold Coast and Fremantle, they would have missed the finals last year. I'm actually confident in saying that. So with me putting Geelong 9th, I'm actually quite comfortable to say that's probably thereabouts where they will finish this year. A lot of people reckon they might even go top 4. Who knows? This year might be the year that something clicks and they actually do go top 4. But I think this year, they're the team that just misses out on playing finals. In 8th position, playing finals, I've got the North Melbourne Football Club. They had a very good pre-season. They've had a really good draft period. They've brought in Aaron Hall. They've brought in Jared Polek. They just missed Josh Kelly, which is upsetting. He could end up still going there in the future, by the way. I'm certain that might be the case. But North Melbourne in 8th position, I'm very confident in saying they will make finals this year. They're looking good. I mean, they've got no Bruce now. They've got Goldstein pretty much running the ruck on his own, unless you count Tom Campbell. Tom Campbell probably had a little bit of a different dynamic at the club as well. But I think North Melbourne, 8th position, probably won't contend from there, but will still put in a good enough season to get the fans excited, and I think that'll be good for the club. In 7th position, and this is probably a pick that I feel the team could miss finals, and somebody like an Essendon or Geelong could take their spot, is Sydney. Let's face it, they're pretty Buddy eccentric up forward. And if Buddy doesn't start the year and misses games like he did last year, those could be games where Sydney really struggle to get over the line. They haven't missed a final series in a very long time, and they're still a very good underrated team. A lot of people sleep on Sydney. Sydney can do a lot of damage when they're up and firing. They've got young Callum Mills coming back into the team fighting fit. It'd be good to see him again. But I just feel if players like Buddy, Isaac Heaney's also got a bit of a cloud over him, I've heard as well. If those type of players don't get up early, Sydney could be chasing the 8 ball from the get-go. And that's not a position Sydney don't want to be in. They don't want to play catch-up. They want to be one of the teams that jumps out of the gates red hot, ready to go. They could win it from 7th. They could finish a lot higher than 7th. They could miss the finals completely. This is a year that Sydney could go either way. Be interesting to see how they do go, but I've got them finishing in 7th position. In 6th position, I've got Greater Western Sydney, the GWS Giants. They've got all their players coming back in that were injured and we haven't seen run around together in a very long time. They did lose Dylan Shield, don't get me wrong, but that now allows players like Tim Taranto, Jacob Hopper, get up into the midfield, get some minutes, and show the talent that those youngsters have, because let's face it, GWS, they've drafted a lot of talent, some of which that we still haven't been able to see on the park yet. So, very excitable. Could be a contender from 6th, could actually push for top 4 as well. Definitely one to keep an eye on this year, but I've got them finishing in 6th. In 5th spot, probably one of the biggest movers this year, I've got the Adelaide Crows. I really think injury did hold them back, and you can't say that injury ruined their season, because you could argue that Collingwood got hit just as hard with injury and they still managed to make a grand final, but Adelaide were hit in a very big way, and they've got all those players now starting to come back into the fold, and I think this could be the year that everything clicks for Adelaide and they turn their 2018 form around, and we see them return to the form that they had in 2017 when they played in the grand final against Richmond. Can they go all the way? I think they most certainly can. Will they go all the way? I don't think they will. I've got them finishing 5th. They could finish in the top 4 quite comfortably, but I definitely think they will be the big improvers along with Brisbane this year. In 4th position, starting the top 4, I've got Collingwood. I think this year they might drop down in rank on the ladder only because their draw is a lot harder than what they had last year. But in saying that, they're starting the season with players that they didn't have at the start and the middle of last season. So it's going to be good to see those players being injected back into the Collingwood lineup and getting around. Could they go all the way this year? I really think they can. I think they were probably stiff to lose it last year. I was actually backing Collingwood to get up and win the grand final last year. Was upsetting to see them lose that lead and in the dying moments just have the game torn from their grasp. I think that might fuel a fire down at Collingwood. There's going to be a lot of, fires burning in the bellies of those players. They're going to come out firing. They could be a real, genuine premiership threat in 2019. I've got them finishing in 4th. In 3rd position, I've got the reigning premiers, West Coast Eagles. I think this year, I'm pretty sure they travel to the MCG a hell of a lot more, and West Coast have to start beating the big Melbourne teams at the MCG if they really want to make a name for themselves. Don't get me wrong, they were one of the best teams in the competition last year. They still stand as one of the best teams in the competition, regardless of year. But this year, I think they won't make it into the top 2, based on the fact that having to travel a little bit more, and we know West Coast don't travel all that well, just like Richmond don't travel all that well. So I'm not being biased, but I think West Coast might miss the mark in some of those games, and it could end up costing them a top 2 finish. In second position, I've got my boys in the yellow and black. I've got Richmond. I just feel this year could be the year they bounce back. They are really going to have that preliminary final burning in the back of their mind, burning in their belly. Just redemption. This is the year of redemption for Richmond. They were the best team for all of the 2018 season, and they let it slip away in one game. And I'm not mincing words, that's serious. They were the best team in the competition. The bookies have them still as the best team in the competition and premiership favourites this year. Do I think they can go all the way? You know I'm going to back my team to go all the way. I didn't last year. I actually predicted GWS to win the premiership last year. But I really think this is the year Richmond bounces back and they will comfortably finish in the top 2. And obviously there's only one team left. I have Melbourne Demons finishing on top of the ladder. All their youngsters are starting to click and find form. Angus Brayshaw out of nowhere, 3rd in the Brownlow last year. I reckon he could be a dark horse for it this year. Getting midfield minutes instead of in the back line. Stroke of genius by Simon Goodwin, because he's an absolute superstar. Christian Petrarca finally starting to find some form up forward and get his hands on the pill a lot more too. Max Gawn in the ruck. Now with Braden Pruce helping him out as well. That is a very good ruck combination. I think this year's the year that Melbourne could go all the way. I think they really could go all the way here. I've got them finishing on top of the ladder, and I do actually have them playing in the grand final this year against Richmond. I do think it'll be a Melbourne-Richmond grand final. I am going to tip Richmond to win that grand final, but I do think Melbourne will be one of the cornerstone teams of the competition this year. That's how my ladder shapes up. I wonder how you guys have your ladders looking. Let me know in the comment section down below how you think the ladder will shape up by the end of the 2018 season, heading into the final series. But it's now time to move on to the solo awards, kicking it off with the Brownlow Medal. I honestly think this year, if fit and he plays the entire season, Nat Fyfe will win his second Brownlow Medal. He probably should already have 2, but this year could be the year he adds to it. I do have 2 Smokies. Well, one's a Smoky, one came out of nowhere last year in the form of Angus Brayshaw. I reckon he could really challenge for the Brownlow this season. My Smoky from GWS is Stephen Coniglio. If he can play a full year out as well, I think he can come out of nowhere. I'm pretty sure now without Dylan Shield, the only players that would really pinch votes from him is maybe Lachie Whitfield or Josh Kelly. But he is an elite player, Stephen Coniglio, and he could actually do a lot of surprising come Brownlow night. But Nat Fyfe for me is my prediction for the win. For the Colemen Medal, I'm going to pick the best big man in town, Big Benny Brown from North Melbourne. Probably a little bit stiff last year not to win it, and he can thank the Gold Coast for letting Jack Riewoldt kick 10 on them. But I think this year, Ben Brown, 64 goals total I'm going to say he's going to kick, and he will get recognition for being one of the best big men in the competition down forward. For the Rising Star, I think everybody's pretty much on the same path here. I'm going with Sam Walsh. Just during the pre-season, he has looked the goods. He will play every single game this year, barring injury. I think he's pretty much already got one hand on it. However, there is one player who I think will challenge him, and that's Zack Butters from Port Adelaide. With Ollie Wines out, Butters will find a lot of midfield minutes until he comes back in, and I think even with Ollie Wines coming back into the team, Butters is good enough to keep his position. He has been very exciting to watch for the Port Adelaide Football Club, a very good young talent to get the fans excited. He's probably the only person I think that's going to challenge, but Sam Walsh for me, this year's NAB Rising Star. To round out my predictions, let's talk about the All-Australian team. The player that I am selecting this year that I think will get a spot and was, I reckon, stiffed last year for not getting a spot, because there's players that made it last year. And I'm going to show how unbiased I am. I'm going to say Shane Edwards probably didn't deserve a spot. I mean, he was up there for goal assists and everything else, but Jake Lloyd from Sydney should have had a spot in the back six, if not at least an interchange position. Jake Lloyd is the player that I'm selecting this year to be chosen for the All-Australian lineup and get the recognition he should have been given last year, but he'll end up getting it this year instead. Those are my predictions for the 2019 season, guys. Let me know your predictions in the comment section down below. Thank you for joining me as always. Later on today, there is another 2 more AFL related videos to drop. One of them is a little surprise for you guys. The other one is the kickstart of my football tipping competition that I am bringing back, and there are going to be prizes handed out for people competing as well. So stay tuned to find out how to get involved. Thank you for joining me as always, guys. If you did enjoy this, leave a thumbs up on the video. It goes a long way to supporting myself, and I cannot thank you guys enough for that. If you're new to the channel and enjoy my content, pledge your allegiance to the Godzirra Nation by hitting subscribe. But that's it from me, guys. I'm out of here, and as always, I will catch you guys next time.